anybody who's had to deal with a narcissist, it's pretty likely that at some point or other, you've had to deal with them ranting and raving or becoming extremely upset over something that doesn't make any sense, or something that doesn't seem like a big deal at all, or something that isn't even happening. And they can be so passionate, so adamant, and so angry over these non-problems that it can make you feel like you're the one who's out of touch with reality. You're the one who's misunderstanding something. In today's video, I'm going to explain why narcissists get so upset over imaginary problems, and hopefully help you realize that you're not the one with the problem. Welcome to Looking Behind the Mirror, where we explore narcissism and take our lives back as we make sense out of nonsense. As a quick disclaimer, everything I say is based on my opinions and my personal experiences. I'm not a professional, and if you're really struggling, I encourage you to seek professional help. I am providing links below for you. Before I get into some examples of what I mean when I talk about narcissists getting upset over imaginary problems, I really want to explain why this happens, the root causes of a narcissist getting upset over nothing, because this really goes very deeply into their identity or lack of identity. Narcissists live in constant discomfort, angst, unease, fear, insecurity. They are constantly patching the holes of their fragile ego, and they're never really able to just take it easy, relax, feel secure, feel like they can trust the world around them. And this is what leads to them freaking out over things that don't make any sense or aren't happening. Pathological narcissists don't really have anything meaningful at the core of their identity. They don't have a strong foundation of who they are. They don't have their own self-worth that they can rely on. They are constantly looking to the outside world for validation, for external, shallow validation, to reassure themselves that they are something that they're actually not. They're constantly building a false persona, a false narrative, and they are constantly manipulating other people into providing feedback to them to reassure them that this fake identity they built is believable or is real. So they are constantly, every minute of every day, working to convince themselves that something that isn't real is. So for as long as this fake identity, this false persona, these delusional, grandiose ideas they have of themselves aren't real, they can never really relax or feel at peace or be able to trust the world around them. And you can't make something imaginary that you made up become real just by wishing it so, even though narcissists sure think they can. So narcissists are kind of doomed to live their life in this constant manufacturing of this fake identity that is never actually going to be real. And it is so hard for them to just stop, back up, take accountability for reality, and look at what they're actually doing, that it seems much easier to them to just continue on this endless path, this endless cycle of trying to build this fake persona, which to them feels so much safer and so much better than looking at who they really are. So what does that have to do with getting upset over imaginary problems? Well, imagine that you lived in a house and for whatever reason, I'm not judging, but let's just say that this house was extremely messy and cluttered and there was crap everywhere and garbage and it smelled funny, and suddenly you had somebody coming over to visit and you went into panic mode and you just shoved everything under the couch. Maybe there was some big box that you just threw a tablecloth over. You shoved a bunch of stuff into the closet and you made it look like it was reasonably clean, but really the whole house was hiding all kinds of piles of garbage everywhere. And this person came in to visit And you're just nervous the whole time that they're going to realize that your house really isn't as clean as you've made it look, that there's a lot of secrets that you're hiding here. So you're on edge the whole time. And if they even so much as glance over at the closet, you're just paranoid that they might open the door and they might discover what you're hiding and they might expose you and this facade that you've built. If your whole life is like this, you are never going to be at ease. You're never going to be comfortable. You're never going to trust your guests until your house is actually clean in reality. What makes this even more sad for a narcissist is that the narcissist is imagining all the garbage in the house. The narcissist's house is actually perfectly fine, but because of childhood trauma and whatever experiences they had while they were growing up and their personality was forming, they became convinced that who they really are at their core is so unacceptable that they can never even look at it themselves, let alone and let anybody else see it. So they spend their whole lives constructing a fake personality, a fake persona that they feel is acceptable. And for them, the only acceptable kind of person is a perfect person, somebody who's better than everybody else in every way, somebody who is flawless. And to add another level of angst and discomfort and anger to the narcissist's existence, not only are they constantly feeling like they're going to be exposed and discovered for who they imagine they are, but they are constantly constructing this fake persona, this fake narrative that they need external validation, constant external validation and feedback in order to reassure themselves that they really are this amazing person that they really aren't. And as we all know, the world doesn't actually revolve around the narcissist. So the narcissist lives in this constant frustration that a lot of the games they play, a lot of the manipulation that they try doesn't succeed. The world isn't cooperating with their fantasy story that they have playing in their head. And they have this delusional feeling that the whole world revolves around them and that everybody should be paying attention to them. Everybody should stop whatever they're doing, stop their whole life to provide validation to the narcissist, because that's the only thing in the universe that could possibly matter. So on top of this fear and this paranoia that they constantly live with, they also have to live with this constant frustration that the world isn't doing what it's supposed to do for them. This is a really uncomfortable way to live, but instead of facing it and doing something about it and taking accountability for these extreme emotional problems they have, they look for distractions. They look for anything else to blame this on. Anything else is better than having to face the truth of this game that they're constantly playing with themselves. And this is why they can become upset over just about anything and over things that aren't even happening, because they need something else to pretend is the thing that's upsetting them. This anger, this angst, this discomfort that they live with 24/7, they don't want to acknowledge the real reasons that they feel that way. So they have to constantly look for any other reason that they can blame it on. On top of this, they imagine that everyone is always paying attention to them, and they are paranoid that people are going to see through this facade they've built. So they live with this constant paranoia that people are going to see something that isn't even happening, which makes them imagine that people are seeing and saying things that they aren't, or feeling or having intentions that they don't have. It's like back with my analogy of the messy house that you're trying to hide. When somebody just glances at the closet door, you're suddenly anxious and upset, and maybe you'll even lash out at this person for something that doesn't even make any sense, because you're imagining that they're looking at this closet door and they're thinking that your house actually is really messy, and they're going to look in the closet and you know that they are thinking bad things about you, when none of that's actually happening in reality. And to add another layer to this causes abusive behavior, because instead of taking accountability For their emotional problems, narcissists very commonly choose to lash out at other people, to use other people as emotional punching bags, and to blame other people for the way they already feel. So this causes a sort of shame spiral, because now they're actually doing things that they ought to be ashamed of. And so now they're not only afraid that people are going to find out that they're this horrible, awful human being that they really aren't, but now they're afraid that people are going to find out that they really are doing these terrible, awful things that they actually are doing in order to cover up the things that they're imagining. So when you try to confront them about their horrible, abusive behavior, they're going to feel like they're the victim, because all they were trying to do in their imagination was live their life, and these people came into their house and looked at their closet door and were thinking bad things about them and trying to humiliate them and embarrass them, and they were just trying to defend themselves, and they can't help it if you made them so angry, and now you're trying to confront them about how angry you made them. Because in order for them to take accountability for the way that they're treating people, they would have to stop this whole cycle and step back and take accountability for it. And it's so much easier for them to just keep doubling down and doubling down on these imaginary problems that they're blaming all of this on. And every time they cause a new problem with the behavior that they're exhibiting as a result of all the imaginary problems they're trying to cover up, they will just invent new imaginary problems to blame that behavior on. Narcissists can't live in reality until they take ownership of everything that they've done and take accountability for all of the emotional problems that they have. Until then, it's just this endless cycle that just builds and builds and builds upon nonsense, upon nonsense, upon nonsense. And that's why they get so upset over things that you can't even keep track of anymore, things that don't even make sense. They'll be raging over something today that yesterday wasn't a big deal at all, and vice versa. So if you're dealing with a narcissist, what do these imaginary problems look like? They can look like all kinds of things. The narcissist can say things to you like, you don't care about me, you don't listen to me, or you don't even try. Or they can complain about something that you're doing that you can't really objectively prove you're doing a certain way. Like they might just complain that the floor is always dirty, that you don't clean the floor the right way. And no matter how hard you try to clean it, no matter how many ways you try to clean it, they always find some way to continue to complain about how dirty the floor is. And it makes you feel like you're going crazy because it's an imaginary problem that they are extremely upset over. And it doesn't make sense to you why they would be so upset over nothing. So it makes you feel like you're the one who's crazy. Surely the floor must still be dirty, or why would they be so upset, even though I've tried to clean it every different way I can imagine. Narcissists can come up with other imaginary problems or just throw things out that don't make sense or aren't consistent with other things that they've said in the past. They might say things like, everyone is against me, after they have cheated and lied and stolen from everybody they know and everybody's turned their back on them. They'll say something like, everybody's turned their back on me, everybody wants me to fail, everyone's out to get me. And when you're seeing this yourself, it's like, well, yeah, because you screwed everyone over. But they don't seem to see it that way because it's easier for them to just pretend that they're the victim. But they can say other things that just are completely fabricated or don't make any sense. Like maybe you'll be driving by a restaurant and they will just say, the service at that place is terrible. And the longer you get to know them, the more experience you have with them, you start to notice a pattern where they just say stuff like that based on nothing. Maybe the server at that restaurant gave them perfectly fine service, and now they're saying the service is terrible, whereas they went to a different restaurant where the server actually wasn't very good, but they seemed fine with the service at that restaurant. Like, it doesn't make any sense. They might throw out other things like, why don't they maintain the roads around here in an area where the roads are perfectly well maintained? Or to bring it back to you, they might say something to you when you're trying to plan an evening out with them. They might say something like, well, you're always late to everything. You always make me late, so let's not even bother going. And this is news to you. You know, maybe you've been with this person for years and this is the first time that they've ever talked to you about how you're always late to everything. And this is really disorienting because, especially if you're not late to everything and this is something they've never brought up before, it really makes you feel like they're pulling the rug out from under you. Like, wow, well, why didn't you ever say anything about this if it was such a big problem? Which of course is because it's not a big problem, because it's an imaginary problem, because in that moment where the narcissist pulled the rug out from under you and told you something terrible about yourself that you had never thought about before, they were really just reacting to some uncomfortable emotions they had. Maybe you said something that made them feel insecure and uncomfortable, and now they're just pretending that they're angry because you're late all the time. They literally just made it up on the fly. And now you're stuck trying to make sense out of it because it would never occur to you that a seemingly rational grown-up person would suddenly become upset over something that is completely made up and isn't happening. They could say other things like, you're always so rude to my friends, or you spend too much money, or you watch too much TV, and you can spend a lot of energy trying to figure out why they're saying these things or trying to fix it, trying to be better, not realizing that these things are made up. And even if you remedied these imaginary problems, the narcissist would just find new ones. A narcissist's entire world is made up of fantasies and lies. And so are the problems that they become upset over. So are the problems that they blame on you. Everything is based on a fantasy. Everything is based on this fake persona, on this facade that they are spending every minute of every day continually patching and building. They are a bottomless pit. They are a pitcher with a hole in the bottom that they expect you to constantly fill. And we can spin in circles for years trying to understand these problems, trying to fix these problems, and worst of all, blaming ourselves for these problems because the narcissist is so adamant that we're to blame for these imaginary problems that aren't happening. But the truth is, no matter how hard we work to understand and or solve these problems, the narcissist is always just going to come up with new ones as fast as we can solve the ones they're complaining about. For me, when I finally realized this, it completely changed my life. It set me free. It gave me back my sanity at a great price. I mean, it's a horrible, painful process to go through accepting the reality of being in a narcissistic relationship. But in my opinion, it is absolutely worth the freedom that you gain. Being able to take your life back, being able to live in a sane world again, where problems are real and you're not trying to solve things that aren't happening. You can't make somebody else's fantasy real. You can't get rid of the garbage that they're hiding in their closet that isn't actually even in there. You can't solve a problem for them that they can't even admit that they have. You can't solve problems that don't exist, and you can't fix a relationship or work things out with somebody whose sole purpose for you is to help them convince themselves of a fantasy and a lie that they are constantly trying to convince themselves of. The only value that your relationship has to the narcissist is the way that you help them convince themselves of these lies and these fantasies. And this is why a narcissist will never face reality for the sake of a relationship when the only value that they see in that relationship is how that relationship helps them escape reality. I know this can be really painful to hear, but for me, this was what helped start me back on the road of taking my life back, of living in a sane world. And for me, as painful as this was to realize and process, this was what I needed to hear to start on the road of healing. I hope this helps. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and comment below any ideas you have for me for future videos. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you like this video and would like to see more like it in the future. Until next time, thanks. Bye.